the 0 people online because at this point in the school year, I'm not sure how much. Well, people they started off pretty strong. Everyone started off like, yes, school, back to school. And now we're like a few weeks in and people are like, it's Monday. It's not going to show up. Some junk like that. Anyway, I want to talk about the 2016 election to start off. 2016. The reason why I gave you guys this question online to discuss, and one of the questions was in regards to the 2016 election and what happened in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. Now, let me show you what was happening leading up to the 2016 election. If I can get the right page. There it is. Cool. Before the 2016 election, which, by the way, the 2016 election happened on November 9th. November 9th. Oh, hello. 1 second. Oh, yes. Where should I give this to? Madam Moore. Yes. I'll give it to her. Okay. Thank you. No problem. Hello. Yes, welcome. Yes, you're on my list. For the time being, this person switched out, so this desk should be free and open. Yes. Remind me and before the end of class, I got to add you to the Google Classroom. On the Google Classroom, you will find the appropriate information in terms of links for my live streams and whatnot. You'll be able to catch up, hopefully. We'll figure that junk out. Right now, I'm talking about the 2016 election. So to give you the brief rundown is this. The question that I posed to the class the other day, and this will take like 15 seconds or so. I posed to the class the other day, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, 3 states that all polled heavily for Hillary Clinton in 2016. But when the night of the election rolled around, Donald Trump won all 3 states and effectively won the presidency. What? I know. You know what the most awkward part of the whole thing was? At Clinton headquarters, where they had all the people there, they had confetti set up. No. That's not the awkward part. The awkward part was the coloring on the confetti. When they were going to release the confetti was supposed to look like glass falling because she broke the glass ceiling. Yeah, that's the awkward part. Anyway, so I have up here just as an example, Wisconsin. Because this chapter that we're going to be covering, we started with randomness, and then we went into random sampling. Sampling is how people get polls. You randomly sample people, ask them the appropriate question, you gather the information, and you're able to report a poll or the results of your poll to the networks, and they're able to use this and be like, hey, Hillary Clinton is leading in Wisconsin. So, the predictions. Now, remind you, November 9th. Was the night of the election, November 9th. So these predictions are pretty much up to date. It's not like they made these predictions in October or March or some junk like that. They made them the week before the election. The LA Times, CNN, the Political Report, Electoral Vote, this weird guy with his crystal ball, Fox News, every single one of them was saying, listen, likely, lean, Democrat. And why they were doing that was because of the polling. Here is the polling. Oh, yeah, I missed a whole one. New York, North Carolina. I lost Wisconsin. Come on, Wisconsin. You know what? Control F, W-I-S-C-O-O, Wyco. There we go. There's Wisconsin. How does what happen? That is exactly what I want to talk about, though. That is exactly what I want to talk about. Why is that? Because that has your question. The question, I'll say this for if anyone's in the live stream right now. The question that she asked was, how can every poll show Hillary Clinton's going to win? How can every expert predict that Hillary Clinton's going to win this particular state? I'm not talking about the rest of the country. Let's talk about the state. But because of that election, because of something that they missed, that is everything that we are talking about in statistics and probability. So again, look at these polls. These polls are not done in like March and April. These polls are done in the weeks leading up to the election. In the weeks, well, not this one, But you can see it. Clinton by 4, Clinton by 12, Clinton by 2, Clinton by 7. Now, yes, there is a margin of error, and we're going to talk about margin of error in a later chapter, a much later chapter. A margin of error does not mean a mistake. It does not mean a mistake. Trust me on that. But these margins are pretty rock solid, you know. Now, that was with a 2-person race. Obviously, there were more people in the race. If you go down to a 3-person race where they included Libertarian Gary Johnson, even still, 8 by Clinton, 4 by Clinton, 5 by Clinton. She is getting the vote in these polls. What happened? 4-way race. Even still, look at that 4-way race. Every single poll. Well, I'll tell you what happened. When you do a sample, when you perform a poll, you are trying to eliminate all sorts of bias. You are trying to eliminate all bias. But there's some forms of bias that you can't eliminate, that unfortunately you can't. Now, oh, the Wisconsin people, they felt neglected. Oh, blah, blah, blah. Oh, there was a late surge. No, screw all that. I know exactly what happened. Check this out. Let's say I go out as a pollster and I collect information from 1,500 people. I go, hey, one of the 1,500 people, I want to know who you're going to vote for, Trump or Hillary. And of these 1,500 people, only 1,000 respond. The other 500 say to me, no, thank you. I don't want to participate in your poll, which is their right. They don't have to participate. They don't have to. It's like, hey, would you please participate? No, thanks. And they walk away. Cool. Fantastic. There's nothing I can do about that. But of the 1,000 who responded, now mind you, I'm rounding these numbers a lot. I'm rounding them a lot. I would say that 600 said Clinton and 400 said Trump. As a statistical pollster, what am I to do? I have to report the information that I get. And I'll show you a sample poll on a website in a moment. But I have to report this. So I report my information. Listen, here's how many I asked. Here's how many responded. It was 60-40 Clinton. Moving on. So the news is like, hey guys, in the latest poll by Mr. Markey, Clinton is winning 60% to 40%. All right, cool. Nothing wrong with that. That's legitimate. I did not make a mistake. The news networks did not make a mistake. The polls were not wrong. They were not wrong. So what happened? What happened on election night? Well, you bribed them. Yeah, there would be a huge paper trail. You kidding me? Like people. He was investigated for like 2 years on that kind of stuff. Yeah, and they came up with nothing. No, they did impeach him. Well, yes, because impeachment doesn't mean you leave the presidency. Impeachment means that the House of Representatives says, listen, we want this to move forward. You're impeached. Okay, moves to the Senate. Then in the Senate, well, it's not that he has the Senate. It's that the Senate is representative of his political party. Yes. Yeah, but interesting fact. Back in, I want to say 1998, Bill Clinton was impeached. Right? Did you know that? Yeah. He was impeached. Yeah. Similar thing happened where the Senate was Democratic and they voted not to convict him. If he was convicted, then he would have lost the presidency. Anyway, back to this. So what happened? Well, what happened was this. How many people did not respond to my poll? 500. Well, here's the thing. Those 500 people, let's just pretend for a moment that those 500 people went on to vote. What are their opinions? I don't know. We're hoping as a pollster, as a statistician, my hope and my assumption is that the people who say no thank you, those 500 people are going to reflect very similar to these numbers. These 500 people that said no thank you, they're going to be 60-40 Clinton, I hope, I think, I believe. But the problem is, in the Rust Belt, good morning. Woo! Fashionably late. I don't know anything about fashionably. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, what happened was in the Rust Belt of America, which was Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin, yes, there was a bit of distrust for Hillary Clinton. There was a bit of distrust. There was a bit of distrust in the media. As you know, in the past several years, the term fake news has become a more popular phrase. There was a distrust for the media. So if you were someone living in the state who, I don't know, maybe you supported Trump more often, you would go look at that pollster and be like, I don't trust you. I don't trust you at all. I'm not going to trust you with my opinion. So they said, no, thank you. I'm not going to respond. And those 500 people who didn't respond, those 500 people, let's say 400 of them voted for Trump and 100 of them voted for Clinton. And what ends up happening on election night? Trump wins Wisconsin. Here's the thing. This is a type of bias that we cannot account for. This is a type of bias called non-response bias. It's called non-response bias, meaning the people who did not respond, the people who opted to say, no, thank you, I don't want to answer your poll, their opinions did not reflect that of those who did. Because if I showed you all those polls, where'd it go? There you are. Let me show you the actual vote count on the night of the election for Wisconsin. Let's see here. Where's the actual vote counts? Statewide results. There we go. Every poll in Wisconsin had Clinton up by 5, up by 4, up by 3, up by 6, there were a couple that were up by 8 or 9. Trump ended up winning by less than 1%. And the way the Electoral College works is that if you win it, doesn't matter by how many votes you win it by, you get all those votes. Fun fact. I've been studying elections for a very long time. I was 16 when the 2000 election rolled around. Do you know what was so special about the 2000 election? Between Al Gore and George W. Bush? The election, first they called Florida for the Democrats, and they're like, wait a minute, oops, made a mistake, it's too close to call. Oops, we don't know who won the election. We don't know who won. They didn't figure out the election for weeks. Eventually, it came down to the fact that they wanted to do a recount of Florida, but the way that the numbers were set up, it wasn't warranted. Florida did not warrant a recount. There were a lot of issues with these things called hanging chads. You know how today, like when you vote, you I don't know if you guys vote. You should vote if you can. But when you vote, you go in, you literally push a button and then push a button. Go. Just saying, this is to pretend that you did. In Florida back in 2000, you know what they did? They did this. There was a piece of paper with a bunch of perforated circles, and you literally had to stand there with like a pencil or a pen and poke out the person that you were going to vote for. I'm not even kidding you. It's really messed up. Well, then after you do that, you pull down the thing. It's called a hanging chad. That's what they call it. Yeah. But then the thing is, they couldn't, if the thing wasn't poked all the way, if it was barely poked or something like that, it's it was questionable. It's well, did they really want to vote for this person? It was such a mess. Such a mess. Anywho. Every state has the right to vote the way that they want to vote. If you want to vote by literally putting a peanut in a jar, you can do that if the state decides. I don't know. Florida. I know. Of course it's Florida. Now, here's the thing. People are like, Trump stole the election. Trump stole the election. Here's the thing. Less than 1%, right? Look what percentage of the people voted for other people. You see what I'm saying? I teach this in a class called Discrete Math. I teach this class in the spring. But let's just run it down to this. If you have an election with more than 2 people, more than 2, it has been proven that if you have more than 2 people in an election, there's no fair way of doing it. You can't do it. There's no fair way. I love math. Love it That's so much. Now, just to show you a little bit of what polling looks like. Now, we're not going to go this in depth with our polling. There's this website called realclearpolitics.com, and they have polls all the time. All the time they have these polls. And I'm bringing up just an example. Well, I get a good one. Let's go with USA Today, maybe. Maybe the USA Today one will give me some good ones. Nope, it won't. But they have all these like weird kind of polls. There we go. That's a decent one. There's a recent poll from September for North Carolina. They usually have. Oh, there we go. There's the report. That's what I wanted. The report is pretty much in depth, where they go into the details as to how many people they actually asked. But I wanted to show you this because I knew this was going to happen. What is this? Out of however many they asked, 2%. 2%. That is terrible. Yes, because what happens if somebody walks up to you on the street or calls your house or does anything like, hey, would you like to participate in a poll? Click. I don't want to talk to you. People really, like, the polling results that you see on TV are only the result of maybe 2% of the population. Just saying, it does not reflect that of the United States. The polls are not wrong. The polls need better ways of collecting data. The polls need better ways of collecting data. Yes. I'm going to show you a video. Yeah, I'm not going to introduce it. I'm just going to show you the video. Basically, if you collect data, if you sample data, if you do all of this wonderful stuff, yes, the results can be misleading. And you, as a statistician, as a math student, have a responsibility to report the information that you get, but also to collect it in the fairest way possible. You cannot let your opinion or your bias influence the results that you put out. You're about to say something, I think. Maybe. Well, they might. Typically, polls are anonymous. See, the thing is, as a statistician, if I'm going to conduct a poll, and this is literally what I was going to talk about later, but I'll kind of like throw a little bit of this in here now. If you're going to go out and collect a poll, the person that you're polling, they have to understand that their answers are anonymous. Their answers are not going to be used for anything nefarious, that their answers are going to be calculated and analyzed in the fairest way possible. You know what I'm saying? Like, it can't be anything nefarious like that. Now, if I were to come to you guys, and I'll think about this for a second. I actually want you to think about this, because this actually happened at Barnegat High School. Ready? Several years ago, they wanted to conduct a poll at Barnegat High School as to what type of drugs and what percentage of the Barnegat student population was using drugs. Right? So they went out and they gave people a poll. Now, if I walked up to you and I gave each and every single one of you a piece of paper that said, like, hey, are you using drugs? It does sound ridiculous. And for the most part, you guys are not going to tell the truth. For the most part. Some people might. But you're not going to tell the truth. They did this at Barnegat High School. They still have randomly posters on the bathroom doors, if you've seen them. No, that poll was taken like 8 years ago. Maybe. I know. Do you want to know the kicker to this whole thing, though, about the poll that I was talking about? 8 years ago, when they took this poll, Barnegat High School students were only allowed to participate if their parents signed off on it. It is the most ridiculous form of bias I have ever seen. And they took these results and they made rulers and pencils and posters and put them up all over the school. 90% of Barnegat High School students have never smoked marijuana. I mean, I'm a teacher. I'm a realist. Like, come on. Like, I want to kick a desk when I hear something like that. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. But anyway, if you collect data, you have to know what context this data was taken in. You have to know the details. You have to know the digging deep information. Because if you don't, then something like this video might happen. Now, I'm going to pause this video at a certain point. But I want you to listen carefully as to what they're presenting to you. Here we go.
Statistics are persuasive, so much so that people, organizations, and whole countries base some of their most important decisions on organized data. But there's a problem with that. Any set of statistics might have something lurking inside it, something that can turn the results completely upside down. For example, imagine you need to choose between two hospitals for an elderly relative's surgery. Out of each hospital's last 1,000 patients, 900 survived at Hospital A, while only 800 survived at Hospital B.
All right, pausing it right there just for a minute. You have an elderly relative, an elderly grandmother, whatever, and you have to figure out what hospital to bring them to. Out of the last 1,000, this is the data that was collected through whatever sample they took. They took a sample of 1,000 patients going into Hospital A, and 900 of them, what did they say? What was the phrasing? Hold on.
Survived at Hospital.
Survived. Okay, well, that's getting pretty dark. Oh, I just noticed this. This is pretty funny. I don't know. But then at Hospital B, I'm writing this on the board so you can see it for later. At Hospital B, 800 out of 1,000. Now, Hospital A, 90% survival rate. Hospital B, 80% survival rate. I think it's pretty obvious at that point, right? Sign me up for Hospital A.
Hospital A, while only 800 survived at Hospital B. So it looks like Hospital A is the better choice. But before you make your decision, remember that not all patients arrive at the hospital with the same level of health. And if we divide each hospital's last 1,000 patients into those who arrived in good health and those who arrived in poor health, the picture starts to look very different. Hospital A had only 100 patients who arrived in poor health, of which 30 survived.
Okay, hold on a second there. So, if you only look at those who arrived in poor health, they only had 30 out of 100 survive. Their 90% survival rate is based on the healthy people already coming in, or not the seriously injured people coming in. Like, I came in with a broken leg. I'm pretty sure I'm going to walk out of the hospital alive, right? If I go in with like heart palpitations, there's a chance I might not. I don't know. Let's just see what happens with Hospital B.
But Hospital B had 400, and they were able to save 210.
Hold on. I got to do the math on that. So coming in with poor health, 210 out of 400. What does that come down to? I can't do math today. Let me do a calculation. I got a calculator. Whatever 21 divided by 40 is. 21 divided by 40. Boom. That's 53%. 52.5% actually. That's 52.5%. Interesting. They had many more people at Hospital B coming in with poor health.
So Hospital B is the better choice for patients who arrive at hospital in poor health with a survival rate of 52.5%.
I forgot they did that.
And what if your relative's health is good when she arrives at the hospital? Strangely enough, Hospital B is still the better choice with a survival rate of over 98%.
All right, pause it right there. I want to recap this before we move forward. Overall, if you look at all 1,000 people from Hospital A, all 1,000, they have a 90% survival rate. But that's hospital A. But if you look at hospital B has a better survival rate if you just look at the individual category of poor health. And according to what this guy is saying, they have a better overall survival rate with good health. Think about that for a second. Hospital B has a better poor health survival rate and good health survival rate. But if you lump everything together into a single category, all of a sudden hospital A is better.
So how can hospital A have a better overall survival rate if hospital B has better survival rates for patients in each of the two groups? What we've stumbled upon is a case of Simpson's paradox, where the same set of data can appear to show opposite trends depending on how it's grouped.
Now, one last thing before I finish the video, I'll just let it play all the way through. First of all, you're not going to need to know the phrase Simpson's paradox. You're not going to need to know that. This is the point that I need you to know. When you are sampling, the way that you collect your data, the way that you organize your data, the way that you present your data makes all the difference in the world. People can take all the polls and samples that they want, but if they decide to present it in a way that looks favorable upon them rather than the truth, then that is dishonest and that is unethical. People get paid big money to manipulate statistics, to manipulate the data, to make it say what their bosses want it to say. You can't do that. You can't do that.
This often occurs when aggregated data hides a conditional variable, sometimes known as a lurking variable, which is a hidden additional factor that significantly influences results. Here, the hidden factor is the relative proportion of patients who arrive in good or poor health. Simpson's paradox isn't just a hypothetical scenario. It pops up from time to time in the real world, sometimes in important contexts. One study in the UK appeared to show that smokers had a higher survival rate than non-smokers over a 20-year time period. That is, until dividing the participants by age group showed that the non-smokers were significantly older on average, and thus more likely to die during the trial period, precisely because they were living longer in general. Here, the age groups are the lurking variable and are vital to correctly interpret the data. In another example, an analysis of Florida's death penalty cases seemed to reveal no racial disparity in sentencing between Black and white defendants convicted of murder. But dividing the cases by the race of the victim told a different story. In either situation, Black defendants were more likely to be sentenced to death. The slightly higher overall sentencing rate for white defendants was due to the fact that cases with white victims were more likely to elicit a death sentence than cases where the victim was Black, and most murders occurred between people of the same race. So how do we avoid falling for the paradox? Unfortunately, there is no one-size-fits-all answer. Data can be grouped and divided in any number of ways, and overall numbers may sometimes give a more accurate picture than data divided into misleading or arbitrary categories. All we can do is carefully study the actual situations the statistics describe and consider whether lurking variables may be present. Otherwise, we leave ourselves vulnerable to those who would use data to manipulate others and promote their own agendas.
Now, that is the key right there. People promoting their own agendas, people promoting their own beliefs in order to do this kind of stuff. It's really messed up. Not today, but there is an amazing video that I want to show you probably next week in regards to John Oliver. And he did this thing where he talked about this concept called P hacking, where people just do like a study and they take the results and they just try every which way to frame it in a certain, there it is right there. That's what we need. And then they take that information and they write a study on it and they get paid millions of dollars to do this because, well, it makes a chocolate company look good, or it makes Coca-Cola look good, or some junk like that. These companies hire statisticians to manipulate data. Manipulating data based on samples. Do you truly believe in your heart of hearts that storks bring babies to new parents? Possibly. Now, I'm going to tell you a true story. This is actually a true story. In the 1700s, there was a village in Europe in which people saw visually, they're like, wow, there are a lot more storks making their nest in this village. I'm not even kidding. This is a true story. Have you heard it before? No? All right. Yeah, there's a lot more storks. Visually, they were like, wow, there's a lot more storks. And what ended up happening many months later, there was a population explosion of babies. I'm not even kidding you. The statistics showed very, very clearly the number of storks going up and the number of babies going up. Storks led to babies. Conclusion, well, yeah, clearly. That's not the case, though. Statistics, gathering samples, presenting your data can be done in a certain way that can manipulate people in that fashion. So what happened? Now, this is, like I said, a true story. What happened? Do you know what happened? Basically, it came down to this. In this village, a bunch of young families came to move into this village. Maybe 10 different young couples who just got married. And they started building their homes. And at that time, there was a brand new style. There was a brand new style of house being built that had a certain shape of chimney. And the shape of chimney was perfect for storks to build their nests because storks like their nests to be very close to a warm source. So yeah, they built these homes and then all these storks started showing up. They're like, wow, look at all these storks. No, I'm not saying that whatsoever. I'm saying there was a bunch of young families who moved in. Newlyweds. No. What are the young families going to do? Procreate, thank you, or produce. They're going to produce. But because they were building these new homes that had these chimneys that storks liked, there was an increase in storks. The lurking variable was the chimney in the new style of house. Pretty crazy. I know. No, they did not. Here's a more up-to-date example. You ready? One more example of samples being collected to manipulate people. Agree or disagree, long-term smoking can most likely lead to lung cancer. Right? Yeah. That we say that today. Yes, obviously. Back in the 1960s, the cigarette companies were able to successfully argue otherwise. Because there was only a correlation. They had a correlation between people with long-term smoking, the amount of time that they spent smoking, and the number of lung cancer cases that showed up. They were able to show, yeah, look, there's a correlation. But correlation does not mean causation. Correlation does not mean cause. Just because they correlate doesn't mean that one caused the other. Think about it. Storks, babies. Did the storks cause the babies? No, but there was a clear correlation. But you can't rely on just the correlation. So these cigarette companies hired statisticians to come in and explain that. And they explained, listen, yes, there's a clear correlation between the years spent smoking and lung cancer cases. But you can't prove that. The only way you could prove that is with an experiment or a long-term observational case study, which eventually they were able to do over the course of 20, 30 years. And now today, it's very obvious. Today, we're like, yes, of course, long-term smoking leads to lung cancer. But back then, they had no idea. I'm sorry, not that they had no idea. They weren't able to prove it. This is how statistics can be manipulated. It's pretty messed up. It is pretty messed up. I love it so much. Love it so much. I had one more video, but I might save that video for the end of class. Let me just double check what it was. Oh, it was the storks one. Well, I already verbally explained that, so screw that. Ladies and gentlemen, here's what I need from you. In order to move this forward, in order for me to get you the information that you need with the time that we have left, I'm going to need those notebooks out and open. Yes. Take out those notebooks. What's up? You left it at home? Oh, okay. I was confused. I thought you were talking to me. Who in the what? Free paper? You want a notebook? Got a notebook for you. That, here, go to the cabinets. I'll tell you which one. Nope. Yes. Chapow, take whatever you want. Yeah. If you guys need a notebook, if you need a writing utensil, if you need an eraser, if you need anything, I got you covered. Just saying, you know. Just make sure you bring it back and keep using it. You don't have to give it back. Just keep bringing it. Anyway, let's talk about samples. This whole idea is on sample surveys. We started a little bit of samples last time, but I'm deep diving it today. Today is the 21st. Samples. What do you call a sample? Oh, I'm sorry. What do you call a sample that surveys every single person within that particular population? Every single person. If I went out and I talked to every single Barnegat High School student and got their opinion on something, that'd be a very special type of sample. A big one. You know the word. I know you know the word. It's just that it's like either you don't want to say it or you're like, it's just not coming to you. It's called the census. It's called the census. I know you've heard the word before. Yeah, but that's exactly what it is. Now, a census, we can all see that. There we go. Surveys all people within a population. Now, it depends on what the population is. My population could be the United States. My population could be Barnegat High School. My population could be people just in my house. My population could be period 1A, cohort 1, for all I care. But if I survey all people within that population, that is called the census. Now, side note. A census is typically a bad idea. Typically a bad idea. Why is that? I'm creating a new flavor of Coca-Cola. It's called Coca-Cola Blueberry. I don't know. They've done vanilla and what else have they done? I don't even know. Cherry, orange. Yeah. I'm doing Coca-Cola Blueberry. So I want to go out and I want to survey every single American. Every single American. I want to know, do you like this idea? Do you like the taste of it? Blah, 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 blah. So I go out and I start surveying people across the country, and I got to get everybody. If I want it to be a census, I got to get everybody. What's the problem with that? Say again? Not everyone wants to do it, yes. What are the practical problems, though? It's going to be hard to find everyone. It'll cost me a lot of money to do it. It'll take me forever. By the time I finish, I might be an old man, and Blueberry Coke will never be a success. A census is typically a bad idea. I say typically. If I wanted to do a census of everybody within period 1A, cohort 1, there's only, well, there's a couple people absent, but there's 7 of you total. There's 7 of you. If there are 7 of you total, yeah, I could easily take a census of 7 people. Easily. It depends on what your population is. It depends on what your population is. Every 10 years, the United States, by law, does a census. Have we talked about that? We have? No? Do you know why they do a census? But why is it important to know how many people are in the country? Well, the census in the United States does several things, but the 2 most important things is this. Number 1, the census determines federal funding to states. Depending on what your population is, the United States is only going to give you a proportional amount of money. Seats in the House of Representatives. Yes, it does. It changes. It changes the number of seats you have in the House of Representatives, and thus it changes the number of electoral votes your state has. Your state has a number of electoral votes equal to the number of representatives plus the number of senators. There's always 2 senators. Yeah. 55. California has 2 senators and 53 representatives, but California's population has been dwindling. People have been leaving. Something about wildfires. I know. No, but for real. So like the next time they fix it, which they'll fix it again in 2024, but the next time they fix it, they might not have 55, they might have 54. They'll redistrict everybody. But they base that on the census every 10 years. Pretty crazy. Let's talk about an SRS, otherwise known as a simple random sample. A simple random sample from the population, which by the way, I'm abbreviating population. From the population, every person has an equal chance of being picked. If I'm going to do a simple random sample, then every person from that population has an equal chance of being picked. Now, what that means is this. If I were to go around every single classroom in this school and randomly pick, let's say 3 kids. I randomly pick 3 kids out of every single classroom in this school. Would that be a simple random sample of Barnegat High School students? I would go around every single classroom and I'd randomly pick 3 students. Or better yet, take every kid in every classroom, line them up on the football field, and then I randomly pick from there. Would that be a simple random sample of Barnegat High School students? No. It's Monday. I only have Monday, Wednesday kids. Tuesday, Thursday kids have no chance of being selected. You're thinking normally. Yes, absolutely. Now you're thinking normally, but now think of it this way. Let's say it's last year. I take every kid in the building, line them up on the football field, I randomly select. It still would technically be no. Are there some people who have late arrivals? Depending on the time of day, would I be missing out on vocational students? Or better yet, I go to the main office. I get an alphabetical listing of every single student at Barnegat High School, and I randomly select from that. You see what I'm saying? That would be a simple random sample. It really depends on how you're collecting the sample. How you're collecting the sample is very important. But if it's going to be a simple random sample, every person has to have an equal chance of being selected. Every single person. You know what they do with polling stations? Let's say I run a polling station in, Barnegat, New Jersey. And I have people on the phones, and they're going to be randomly calling people. Now, typically, believe it or not, people randomly call all the time at dinner time because they assume you're going to be home at dinner time. Okay, whatever. But if I'm going to call people around like 5 or 6 o'clock, I'm only going to call people in the Eastern time zone. Because if it's 5 or 6 o'clock in Barnegat, what time is it in California?
2 o'clock.
Yeah, like 2 o'clock, right? But I want to call them around dinner time. So the way that I do this simple random sample is like I randomly select people just from the East Coast and call them. Then when the hour goes by, then I randomly select from Central Time Zone, then Mountain, then Pacific, and then eventually maybe I'll get to Hawaii. Did you know that there's a mountain on the island, one of the islands of Hawaii, that has like heavy snow caps? Yeah.
Last
I know. You know where I learned that from? Pokemon. Anyway. True story. But then I looked it up. It's a real thing. It's a real thing. There is snow-covered mountaintops in Hawaii. Now, let's talk about a different type of sampling. Let's talk about a different type of sampling. Not simple random, not simple random sample, but systematic sampling. Systematic. Let's just say population is in an order that is considered random. So you select every nth person. You select every nth person. And what that means is this. There's only 5 of you. Is it fair to say that the 5 of you entered my room in a random order? It's fair. That's fair, yeah. The population is in an order that is considered random. Cool. And I select every nth person. Every nth person. Don't let him walk by again and yell at me. He's going to yell at me later. I might get a bigger one or something. Yeah. Nth. Nth. Here, I'll write it right here so you can see what I'm talking about. It's N. Like, you know how like you select every 5th person or 7th person. Exactly. So depending, like if I had like, 20 of you, let's just say, I know there's not 20 of you, but if there were 20 of you and every 3rd person, I said, okay, every 3rd person in the door, I'm going to give them $5. Cool. But that would be systematic sampling because you're supposedly coming into my room in a random order and I'm every 3rd person. So 1 to this person, 1 to this person. That is called systematic sampling. So I could go down to the cafeteria. I could go, if we had people in the cafeteria, that is, but I could go down to the cafeteria and I could select every 5th person walking out. Every 5th person walking out of the cafeteria, I could sample them and ask them a question. It is a little chaotic down there, which is why, maybe you have like a team of people doing this, or something like that, or you have people covering every door or some junk like that, But sometimes they do that with people leaving like supermarkets or they actually do this. It's called on election night. They'll call it exit polling. Exit polling is literally polling people as they're walking out of the place where they vote. Now, this year is going to be a little strange. Yes. Correct. I know. I know, but they do that. They get paid big bucks. Just saying. What's happening this year, though, that's going to disrupt a lot of that? Mail-in ballots. Yeah. It's going to disrupt it a lot. It's going to be a fun election. I might live stream it. Yeah, I'm going to live stream it maybe from my personal channel. But I'll throw the links on the Google Classroom. Because hey, you guys have off that week. The whole week. Oh, it's on November 3rd, I want to say. Yeah, exactly. Teacher conventions, but no one ever goes. But anyway, but I might live stream the election. I have a whiteboard at home with a image of the United States on it, and I have all of my numbers and my data on there, and I do an analysis. I can't show the TV. Oh yeah, I would love to make like a video actually doing the prediction. Like, hey, this is what I want to do. I got to make one, but I do have predictions. Yes. Right now, here's my current prediction. Which might change, but I've had this prediction for 6 months. I've told teachers in the hallway. My prediction is early in the night, whoever wins Virginia, my prediction is that they'll go on to win the whole thing. Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Why do you think that?
I don't know.
Right.
Question for all of you students of history. Do you know what happens if the Electoral College ends in a 269-269 tie?
So I swear I really hope this.
No, it's not ever happened, 269-269 tie, but there has been a time in the past. It was, I want to say John Adams versus Thomas Jefferson, or maybe, no, John Quincy Adams versus Andrew Jackson, I want to say. I'll tell you in a minute. But anyway, they didn't end up tied, but none of them had a majority. You have to have a majority. You have to have over 50% of the electoral vote. You have to. Otherwise, the House of Representatives picks the president,
Oh, yes.
which would go Biden most likely. But then the Senate picks the vice president.
Like, that's not gonna work out, because
Of course it will. Do you know the last time there was a president, vice president from different parties? Yeah, it was Abraham Lincoln. That ended well. That ended really well. I need to see this play like I need a hole in the head. Anyway, I want to talk about Boston cream donuts.
Oh my God, those are my favorite.
I love Boston cream donuts. Don't you?
Yeah, those are my favorite.
Yes. Boston cream donuts.
You guys don't like them,
I use Boston cream donuts in order to explain the next two types of sampling. Cluster versus stratified. This is how I use Boston cream donuts to do it. Now, Boston cream donuts are made up of a lot of different things. They have the chocolate. They have the filling. Well, the creamish filling. And not even a cream. It's like a pudding, right? It's like a pudding filling. So they have the chocolate. They have the pudding filling. They have like kind of like the flaky donut. They have the Boston, right? Cool. If you took a decent bite, like a bite of the Boston cream donut, would you agree that in that one bite, you would get a nice representation of all of those ingredients?
I don't know, because I don't know if it's just I have to take like 2 or 3 bites to get to like the filling. I don't know if it's just because like I'm not normal size, but
I think that's your answer.
like that, maybe it's just me.
No, but in all honesty, though, I mean, a normal person, oh, sorry, you would get an equal representation of everything that the Boston cream donut was about. Now, imagine a different scenario where I take the Boston cream donut and I put over here, I rip off the chocolate. I pour the pudding filling. Here's the crust. Here's the Boston, right? I separate them into all of these different little categories. Then I taste a little bit of the chocolate. I taste a little bit of the Boston. I taste a little bit of the crust. I taste a little bit of the filling. That's a different type of sampling. That is the difference between these two types of sampling. You know, usually I talk about like a Boston cream cake or pie or something like that, Boston cream pie, where you take like a slice. That slice is like the bite. So what does that mean for us? A cluster sample is taking the bite. A cluster sample is taking the bite. It is a sample from the population, and again, I'm abbreviating the word population. It is a sample from the population that represents every component of the population. I'm not saying that it is. I'm not saying that, it's perfect of the population, but it represents every component. For example, If I were to go down to last year's cafeteria, last year's, not this year, because obviously it's not going to work, but if I go to last year's cafeteria and how many tables are down there? There's like, what, 8 or 9 tables? Something like that, like rows of tables, you know what I'm talking about? If I randomly select one of those tables last year, would I get a decent representation of freshman, sophomore, junior, senior? Oh, probably not. Why not? I thought you sit with your friends. All right, well, seniors might be at one end of the table, but then freshmen might. Yeah, like the whole row. Nah, I don't care about that one. No, I'm talking about like one entire row, like the entire row. Yeah, you like there might be freshmen at one end, sophomores in the seniors in the front, whatever, you know? It would be equal representation. Not equal, but representation. See, the thing is, if I were to then take, here's the freshman class. We'll beat them up later. The sophomore class, the junior class, the senior class. If I were to separate them first, that would be an example of stratified sampling. Taking a bite of the Boston cream pie versus separating the Boston cream pie into different components and then sampling. There are different types of sampling that you could potentially do. I'll talk a little bit more about cluster and stratified in a moment. I just want to make sure that I write down this definition. You sample, in a stratified sample, you sample from each, I'm going to write this out carefully, homogeneous, I got to spell it right. You sample from each homogeneous group in the population, otherwise known as strata. Otherwise known as strata. If I were to first separate groups by some characteristic that they all had in common, if I were to separate by freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, or maybe I separated by, I don't know, like AP honors and CP or some junk like that. Or maybe I separated by where you live in Barnegat. Settlers, Rose Hill, Windward Development, Timbers, downtown. Settlers. Anyway, anybody settlers? Yeah. Have we had this conversation? About settlers. Yeah. Settlers born and raised. Anyway. But still, if you separate by some component that they all have in common, you are separating them into these homogeneous groups called strata. This is the example of separating the Boston cream donut into the cream, the Boston, the chocolate, whatever, and then sampling a little bit. Whereas the cluster sample is taking a slice, and in that one sample, it has a taste of everything. That's what a cluster sample is. Depending on the situation, depending on the context, depending on what you might be asking, you may have to do one over the other. For example, if I were to put out a survey to everyone in the school and ask them their opinion as to what they're going to do after high school. What are you going to do after high school? What are you going to do? If you're going to college, what are you going to major in? If you're going to the workforce, what job? If you're going to military, what branch? If you're doing vocational, what vocation? If I were to put out that survey, don't you think that it would be worth it to separate them by grade level? Because think about the opinion of a senior versus the opinion of a freshman. A senior may not have everything figured out, but a senior definitely has a better idea as to what they're going to do after high school compared to that of a stupid freshman. Just saying. I'm being honest though, right? Freshmen have no idea what's going on. They barely know what classroom to go to. Yes, but that would be a perfect situation for stratified sampling because I separate them into freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, and then sample a little bit from each. And now I know, okay, these are my freshman samples. Because remember before we were talking, they had to be anonymous. Yes, they have to be anonymous. I understand that. But if you separate them into these strata and then sample, then all of a sudden, yes, these are my freshman results. Let's compare them to my senior results. And that would be incredibly helpful. That would be incredibly helpful. So, one last little piece of information. One last little piece of information, and then we're going to call it a little day here. By the way, next class, we're going to talk about bias. Ooh, I love bias. Last part, ways to collect data. Sampling is very important. Now, here's one thing that I didn't specify. Simple random sample, systematic, stratified, cluster. When you collect those samples, they have to be random. They have to be random. If they are not random, then that's an issue. Think back to the soup. Think back to the soup. You weren't here for the soup. Imagine a pot of soup this big, okay? If I made a pot of soup that big, I can easily just, okay, boom, there's a spoonful. That spoonful is representative of the whole soup, or it should be. It should be, as long as I did what to the soup? I stirred it, made it random. As long as I randomized the soup and then took a spoonful, that spoonful should represent the whole pot. That's the idea of the pot of soup. If you don't stir it, then you might just be getting, oh crap, that's just a spoonful of spices, that I just threw on top at the last minute. I never stirred them in, and thus would affect your sample. It has to be random. It has to be random. So, here we go. Ways to collect data. First, yes, surveys. In the coming weeks, you guys are actually going to be doing a mini project for me where you're going to be creating your own surveys. Unfortunately, I can't let you go out and actually collect the data because of the virus. But anyway, I know. You could also conduct an experiment. In the experiment, there has to be some level of randomness. Every single one of these data collections have to be random in some form. Have to be. You could perform a survey. You can conduct an experiment. You could do what they call an observational study. It was because of observational studies that we were able to show that smoking cigarettes causes cancer. You can't do that with correlation. You have to do that with an experiment or an observational study. You have to. We're going to talk more about that. We're going to talk more about that in the coming weeks with experiments, but we'll get there. And the last part that you can collect data, it's what we did the first couple days of class. You could do a simulation. We played Hi-Ho Cherry-O. Oh, you weren't here for that. We played Hi-Ho Cherry-O. Ever hear of that? Hi-Ho Cherry-O is this amazing game. I won't go into the details, but the thing is, we wanted to play like a bunch of games. And in order to play a bunch of games, we needed to do it quickly. We needed to randomize stuff. So we ran a simulation. If you watch the videos on my live streams, you'll see it. It'll be there. Ha-ha! Ladies and gentlemen, be on the lookout for Google Classroom. I got to add you to Google Classroom. I'm going to do it in a moment after I sign off here. Because I'm going to be assigning something for this week. Make sure you've checked that quizzes if you haven't already taken it. I believe a lot of you have already taken it, which is great. Fantastic. I'm going to be updating those grades accordingly. And tonight's back to school night, isn't it? It's going to be, yeah, I know, right? Yeah, all the teachers have to come in and all the parents get to stay home. No opinion. We'll see you all later in a second. There you go. See ya. Oh, goodness.